So OP-08 pre-release to Legends is only a couple of weeks away. In fact, the official start date for pre-release is the 6th of September. And registrations for pre-release events have actually already started. They started a couple of days ago. They opened on the 23rd of August. So go check your Bandai app, see if you can still get into one of these events if you haven't signed up already. I know some places in the world things fill up pretty quickly. Other places, yeah, you can take your time to get into these events. But if it is your first pre-release event, quickly how they work, they'll work one of two ways. One, the boring way, which is a constructed event, which is basically you're bringing your OP-07 decks to the event, everyone plays out a normal tournament, and the winner takes home the pre-release prizing. The second way is the way more exciting way, which is what today's video is going to be focusing on, is a sealed event. And basically how that works is you'll get 6 packs on entry, you'll open them up, and you'll build a 40 card deck from those cards. There is no color restriction to your deck building, so you can use any color in any amount of combination. The only color rule that still applies is if your card has an effect that allows you to search a black card or a red card, that color rule still applies. The other change to deck building is you have no single card limit. So basically what that means is you can run 1 copy all the way up to 40 copies of the exact same card. All of it's completely legal. Now you may be wondering, what about leaders? Well, in fact, we're going to talk about leaders and a few other things in today's video. We're going to cover the key leaders to take to a pre-release event, some of the key cards from OP-08 that you want to include in your deck, and then some other cards you may want to fill in some spaces if you still have some left over. We'll try and have some timestamps for all of these in the video or in the pinned comment section down below. By the way, if you do want to get in on some box breaks for OP-08, check the link to our store in the description down below, where you can join in one of a couple box breaks that will hopefully be happening around the release date of OP-08. Now, before we get right into it, what are we all playing for? Well, OP-08 winner prizing is going to be this wonderful marker, which will be on screen for you here, which is a blue cost, 4 cost 6,000 body on KO. Add this card back to your hand. A promo that we haven't seen before, but this is the coveted prize of the pre-release event. Anyone who participates will get this card in kind of like the lower rarity version, plus a couple of pre-release packs, which is basically all the commons and uncommons from the set with some pre-release stamps on there. I think it's 2 cards per pack that you'll get, and you might get a couple packs with that there. On screen in front of me here, we have some of the best leaders when it comes to a sealed pre-release style event. We've got OP-10, Don ×1, everything you have gets a 1000k buff. We've got Starter Kid, activate main, rest 3 Don, trash a card from hand, you can reset this leader is active, so you can get some double swings in there, quite nice. Katakuri, Don ×1, you're going to buff yourself by 1000, so you swing 7000, and you get to look at the top life of yours or your opponent's, and you can put that at the top or the bottom, so nice life. So nice life manipulation going on there. Or you have Bonnie, which is on your opponent's attack. You can rest a Don to rest a leader or character of theirs. In my opinion, I'm going to lean more towards one of the green ones, the Captain Kid or the Bonnie, as the better options, but any of these are fantastic. Now, if you don't want to run any of these on screen, general recommendations is to run something that has a very generic effect, an effect that is not archetype specific. So you want to go for something like your blue starter deck Crocodile, where you can get some nice removal effects going on there, just very generic stuff there. You generally do want to stay away from the 4 life leaders, because yeah, just being down a life in these events can be a bit detrimental to you when you don't know exactly what your deck's going to look like going into it. The best one out of the 4 life leaders is the green yellow Yamato, but I probably wouldn't run it in this event. As you'll see later on in the video, we'll have very easy access to a lot of blockers, so that kind of mitigates the best thing about the green yellow Yamato. All right, first of all, let's talk about the 2k counters that we have in the deck. Generally, when it comes to these guys, they're max out, must include all the ones that you find. But here they are all on the screen here. As you can see, we've got a few here. And let's just take a look at the rarities, which have just popped up on screen here. So we see that we've only got 1 common, there's 4 uncommons, 4 rares, and 1 super rare, which means it could be a bit hit and miss with what you pull when it comes to your 2k counters. You might be lucky and find a lot of those uncommons. You might be unlucky and not really see a lot of them. So generally, you do want to max out on your 2k counters. Now, going over some of the 2k counters that have some really neat effects, let's first of all look at Who's Who, which is a 5 cost 5000 body, 2000 counter. On play, you discard a card from your hand, and you can KO one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 3 or less. Now, 3 or less may not seem very big, and you kind of see it's not kind of a prime amount for your KOing, but we do have access to some cards that allow you to decrease cost of your opponent's characters, which makes this effect a lot better. Speaking of those cost reduction stuff, that's our next 2k counter in Sasaki, which is a 1 cost 1000 body, activate main, rest a Don and this character and give something -2 cost for the turn. So turning that Who's Who into a 5 cost KO, which is fantastic. And then next up, we want to look at Duval. So we've seen a little bit with the Who's Who where the KO is based on cost, and that's true for pretty much all the other removal that we have access to in OP-08, all based around cost reduction. We'll talk more about this later on in the video, but Duval is kind of a counter to all those cards here. It's an on play, give one of your characters +1 cost until the end of your opponent's next turn. Next up, let's talk about the blockers that we have in the set. This is all of them here on screen right now. As you can see, their costs kind of vary a bit, but they all bounce between that 2 and that 5 cost right there. So thinking back to Who's Who, you can hit some of these straight away. You got some cost reduction stuff. You can hit basically all the blockers here, which is really good. Now, in terms of the rarities here, we can see that a lot of them are common. We've got 4 of them that are common, so we're going to have quite easy access to the blockers. And with us having easy access to blockers, generally you probably want to run as many as that you find, but if you find a whole bunch and you find more than 8, I probably wouldn't run more than 8. You definitely can, but ideally just to fit in some other cards in there, you probably want to max out on 8. Looking at some key ones, the first one here we've got is Pedro, which is, the effect is on KO, you can either rest one of your opponent's Don cards or you can KO one of their rested characters with a cost of 6 or less, so you can kind of get a block and a KO at the same time. Next up, we have Scratch Manip. So if you see multiple of this one you probably do want to run multiple of, just because it has a cost minusing effect as activate main. You can give one of your opponents -1 cost. You don't have to rest anything, rest this character, so it can be just sit there as a blocker, sit there as a body on board. You're constantly getting some cost reduction to allow your KOing effects to be more effective. Next up, for another one that has a decent effect, is the Numal. On play, draw 2 cards, then you place 2 cards from your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order. So basically just filtering out your hand, finding the pieces that you need, getting rid of some dead cards. And the other one that has an okay effect is the Charlotte Brûlée. This one is on KO, you can ramp a Don rested. So this one is better to play out early. You get the block early, you get that ramp, so you are 1 Don ahead in the curve, so it can be a bit nicer to get some big bodies out quicker. Now let's shift our focus to the vanillas. Vanillas are very good when it comes to a sealed event. Now if we look at their rarities, they're all common, so we're probably going to see a bunch of these. So having said that, you know, anywhere up like around 8 is probably a good number to run in the deck. I would say you probably want to fill in those cost spots that you find that you're missing. So if you find a lot of stuff in your deck that you built is based around that higher cost, that 5 or above, you kind of want to fill in that lower cost area with these vanillas. But the stat line for these is all fantastic. You're looking at a 7 cost 9,000 body with a counter. It's fantastic. Can get a big body out nice and early, get some nice pressure there. You got your 1 and 2 Don cost there, so you have something to play on turn 1, which is fantastic as well. So just try to fill out those spaces, make sure you got some plays to have each turn. Now let's talk about our counter events. The only good ones in the set are the ones that we have here on screen. 2 of them are common, which is the 2 on either end there, the I'd Never Shoot and the Burn Bazooka, and the one in the middle is the only uncommon one. So we're probably going to see some of these, and I'd probably run anywhere from, I guess, like 2 to 4 or 0 to 4 in the deck, depending what else I pull in my packs. And the Burn Bazooka is probably the worst one out of it. It has looks like a long effect there, but basically you're only going to use the first part of it, which is a 2 cost 4,000 buff. Now, if we look at I'd Never Shoot, so it has that same first effect that we spoke about with the Bazooka, which costs 2 counter to give a character or leader plus 4,000. But then you can also give one of your opponent's characters -1,000 for the turn. So you can kind of stop almost 2 attacks with this here, or make your opponent use a bit more Don to get some effective attacks on you. The trigger there is to give up to one of your leaders or characters +1,000 power for the turn. So that can be quite nice. Usually you want to use it on your leader, but sometimes you just need to use it on a character to save it. The uncommon that we have here is the Munch Munch mutation. This one costs you 3. You can use it on your main, or you can use it as a counter. You're going to give one of your opponent's characters -3,000 power for the turn, and then you're going to give one of your characters +3,000 for the turn. So you just got to keep in mind it is only characters this does affect, but that 3,000 is massive. And the trigger is also absolutely wild. You can KO something with 5,000 power or less, which is going to be a bunch of things in this set. Now let's talk about our removal. We've kind of hinted at a few of these as we've gone along, but these are all the cards in the set that give you access to removal. And as I mentioned before, cost is kind of the main focus. All of these here, except for the 2 secret rares, are purely based on cost of the character, not power, not anything else. It's all based on cost. Let's talk about the two secret rares quickly here because they are a bit different in terms of how they're going to KO. The Rayleigh there is a cost 8,000 body. On play, you can minus a character by 3,000 until the end of your opponent's next turn, and then you can minus another character by 2,000 until the end of your opponent's next turn. So you're getting some good power reduction there, which can last a while, which can be quite nice. Helps you kind of remove stuff or helps to stop stuff from being a threat to you next turn, and then you can KO something that has 3,000 power or less. So that's the only card that we have access to outside of some of the triggers we've spoken about before that KOs things based on power. The Kaido and the Linlin, the secret rare there, that's a when attacking Dom -10, you KO absolutely everything on the field, and then you recover a life and your opponent trashes a life. So absolute monster stats. You're going to kill all your Don to be able to get this off there, so sometimes can be useful. I'm probably not going to lean too much towards the secret rares. They are going to be a little bit harder to find anyway, so you may not run into that dilemma of deciding if you want one or not, but I'm probably going to steer away from them, maybe include the Rayleigh if I see it. Now, if we bring up the other rarities here, so we've got a couple of super rares in here, which is the Linlin Jack and the Kaido, and then we've got a rare and the rest are uncommon. The rare in there is the Jozu. So we may not see a lot of these removal cards, which is why you probably just want to include them when you do see them. Now, before we jump into the ins and outs of all those removal cards that we have access to, let's talk about the cost manipulation stuff that we have access to, because I said it's all based around cost, the removal in this set. We've got all the cost reduction stuff available to us here on screen right now. We've spoken about the Sakasi and the Apu already. The Sheep's Head and the Tashigi are the other two ones here. The Tashigi is one of the special rares in the set there. We saw the Blocker Queen as the other one. So if you see that, yeah, good on you for being able to pull one first of all, but yeah, include it because it is a nice -2 cost that you'll have access to. You just make your removal cards a lot better. But let's talk about the other one that we have here, which is the Sheep's Head. So Sheep's Head is a 2 cost, 3,000 body, 1,000 counter. Don times 1. All your opponent's characters have -1 cost. Don't have to rest anything, just attach a Don, which is nice. So the Sheep's Head can stick around for a few turns there, make all those removal cards a lot better. Now, let's go back to the removal ones here. So these are the ones that give you immediate access to removal. So they're on play, you'll get some sort of effect going on. Out of these here, the Opera is probably the worst one. I won't dive into it in detail, have its own kind of picture and everything, but you're basically trashing a life to KO something that's equivalent to the number of life your opponent has. So it can be good, cannot be good. It is a 6 cost. You're probably going to see it mid-late game anyway, and you probably want to apply a bit of pressure to your opponent then anyway. So that's probably going to be the worst one there, but it is worth running if you don't see any of the other ones though. Let's talk about one of the super rares here in Linlin. So this is on play Dom -1. You trash a card from your hand, then you add 1 card from the top of your deck to your life as a recovery, and then you can add one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 6 or less to the top or bottom of their life. So once again, if you have some cost reduction stuff in there, you're going to be removing some bigger bodies back into their life. So we've seen this similar with Katakuri and other things like that. We know how valuable that can be. Another super rare that we have access to is Kaido. It's a 9 cost, 9,000 body, no counter. The activate main once per turn, trash a card from your hand. If this character was played this turn, trash one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 7 or less. That's quite nice. You can dodge some on KO stuff. There's not too many in this set, but you can dodge things like the Pedro that we spoke about before. And then your opponent trashes 1 card from your hand. You can get the ditching 1 card from hand effect multiple times. You just can't get the trashing a character multiple times. That's only on the turn that Kaido is played. Next up we have Jozu, which is the rare in our removal cards. This one is an on play. You return one of your own characters to your hand, and then you can return one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 6 or less to their hand. So once again, you have your cost reduction stuff in there. That's going to be a bigger character that you can remove. Now, with Jozu's effect, you are going to be bouncing back some cards back to your hand. So there are some key ones you probably do want to bounce back to your hand. These are them here on screen right here. We've spoken about some of them. Some of them we'll talk about in just a moment, but they have some pretty cool effects that you might want to reoccur over and over again. Next up, we have Burnblade, which is an event. This is an activate main, costing you 5. You may add 1 card from the top or bottom of your life to your hand. Then you KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 7 or less. You have your cost reduction stuff out there. You're going to be KOing something bigger or basically everything in this set. And then the trigger is you can add a card from the top or bottom of your life to your hand and then replace it with a card from your hand. Now we're going to talk about the removal cards that we have access to that we can use multiple times. So not just on play, we can get the effects off a bunch of turns. First up, we have Edward Removal, Don times 1 when attacking. Return something with the cost of 3 or less to the owner's hand. So you can do that to your opponent's characters, you can do to some of yours. There's not too many in that threshold that you want to kind of bounce back, more focusing on controlling your opponent's board there. The Oven is when attacking, you can don -1 to KO something with a cost of 3 or less. So same cost range, KOing it, and you're minusing it on instead of attaching it on. And then we have Jack, which is a activate main. You rest this character, draw a card and trash a card, and then you can KO something with a cost of 3 or lower. So all these 3 cost or lower is what they'll affect. But then if we talk about those cost reduction stuff, which you mentioned before, the Sakasi, Apu, Sheep's Head, and Tashigi, you can make that sort of stuff bigger there. The Apu and the Sheep's Head, they're the ones that don't require you to rest the character. So there is a very good chance that you can use those cost reduction stuff multiple times. So if you see you have multiple Apus, because they're blockers, have a few of them out on board, have a couple of these, you're constantly going to be removing 5 cost characters quite easily, but bigger if you have some of your other cost reduction stuff going on. Now let's talk about some of the stun cards that we have access to. We spoke about some removal, but there's some stun cards which stop things from attacking or restanding on your opponent's turn. So there are all the options that we have available to us for that. So breaking down the rarities here, we can see it's a nice spread there. So there's a good chance you'll see some of these in the packs that you open, but let's talk about some of the key ones. Starting off with Carrot. So Carrot is a super rare, 5 cost, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter on play and when attacking, which is really good. So you can get this off multiple times. Carrot, yeah, definitely a must include if you pull it. The effect is up to one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 7 or less do not become active during your opponent's next refresh phase. Now it is a very kind of reactive card because you're going to be stunning something that was rested, but you can get it off multiple times. You have some of your cost reduction stuff in there. You can stun anything in this sealed event. Next really good one we have here is an event, Electric Luna. This one costs you 3 on your main. All your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 7 or less do not become active during your opponent's next refresh phase. Wild. And then the trigger is rest one of your opponent's characters. So yeah, all around pretty good card. Probably going to include this one right here. Next up, we have another super rare in S Snake. This one is a 5 cost, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter, same stats as the Carrot. On play, one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less, other than Luffy, which you probably won't see a Luffy in this event, cannot attack until the end of your opponent's next turn, and the trigger is you can activate the same effect there. Next up, we have Consulate, which is a 3 cost, 4,000 body, 1,000 counter. This one is an uncommon. When attacking, up to one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less does not become active during the next refresh phase. This one is the next best one out of all those ones that we have, just because that cost is a 4. It's a little bit slower because it is a when attacking, but it's one that we can get multiple times because it is a when attacking. Next up, we have Shishilian. This is the same stats as the Consulate we just saw before. The effect's slightly different. It's an on play. Up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less cannot become active during the next refresh phase. So on play, bit quicker in terms of getting that effect off, but it is only a once-off effect. We did talk about some cards that allow you to bounce back some cards to your hand, so then you can replay this out, so that can make that good target for them. And then if you have your cost reduction stuff, once again, we've said it a few times, you can stun things that are a lot bigger than the 3 cost. Next up, let's talk about some of the power manipulation cards that we have. And you definitely want to include a couple of these. These are all the ones that we have access to. We've spoken about Rayleigh already, and then the rest we have here on screen. The Dalton is a one that can also double as a rush character, but it's not fantastic because you do have to take a life to be able to get that rush. But the on plays, you can minus something by 1,000. So it is a bit of a kind of a lackluster in terms of power reduction there, but it is a chunky body, so you may just want to run it for that if you need to fill some space. And there we have a breakdown of the rarities there. So most of them are rares. One is a common, which is the chest. The rest are rares outside of the Rayleigh. By far the best one is Warpole. Warpole is a rare, a Don times 1 when attacking. Give one of your opponent's characters minus 2,000 for the turn, and then you can give this character plus 2,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. So it becomes an 8k for your turn and your opponent's turn. You're going to be swinging 9k because you need a Don attached for the effect. 8k on your opponent's turn, much easier to defend, but you're also minusing something by 2000 power, so it makes it a lot easier for you to clear your opponent's board. Chess is the common that we spoke about there. This is one you'll probably see a few copies of. It is a 3 cost, 3000 body, 1000 counter. On play, give one of your opponent's characters minus 2000 power for the turn. And then if you don't control a Kura Marino, which you probably won't really want to play, you can play it from your hand. So if you really want to fill some spots, you can chuck that in there if you do see that, but otherwise you're probably not going to use the other part of the effect, more for the on play to get that power reduction. Next up, we have Cloven Rose, which is an event. Cost you 2, activate and give up to 3 of your characters plus 1000 power for the turn, and then you can give one of your opponent's characters minus 2000 power for the turn. So this is really good if you do have a nice wide board. You're basically getting 3 Don worth for spending 2 Don. And you're also going to get a power reduction. So nice and easy to clear some characters there. The trigger is give up to one of your opponent's leaders or characters minus 3000 power for the turn. So that's also pretty good on the defensive side of things. Next, let's talk about the rush characters. You probably want to run anywhere from 0 to 2 of the rush characters. These are all of them right here. And we've break down the rarity, 2 rares, 2 uncommons. So yeah, you may or may not see any rush cards in the packs that you open, but not a bad idea to have some in the deck just to help you to clear the board, close out the game, that sort of stuff. Now, if we look at all their stats, they're all fairly similar in how they go with their cost to power ratio. So there's some other things we can look at to see if something is going to be good, worth running. The King is probably not going to be worth running because it doesn't have a counter. You want to limit the cards that you have that, or I guess cards that don't have counter in your deck there. So we kind of rule the King out straight away there. The Dalton, we kind of mentioned it before. It's, yeah, to get the rush, you need to take a life. So if you're desperate, you can kind of use it to close out a game, but generally I probably want to avoid the Dalton, so we can cross that one out there. The other two, the Robson and the Nekomamushi, are far better in terms of your value with your Don. The Robson, you do have to have another 2 Don that you can attach to get the rush. So it essentially becomes a 5 cost, 6000 power rush character, the exact same stats as the Nekomamushi. The Nekomamushi only gets rushed if your opponent has 7 or more rested cards in play, so that includes their Don and their leader and all that sort of stuff there. So a little bit, can be a little bit situational there, but those are probably your 2 better rush options. As I said before, anywhere from 0 to 2 rush cards is going to be good to run in the deck. Now let's talk about some other cards that have some pretty neat effects that you probably want to chuck in if you do see them. Here is a list of all of them here, and we look at their rarities. So spread once again, so you might see some of them you might not see at all, but you're probably going to see at least 1 or 2 of these cards in the packs that you open. Sheep's Head, one that we've spoken about before, so we won't go over Sheep's Head in too much detail here, but let's start with S-Shark, which is quite nice. We're going to see access to a lot of blockers in this sealed event. So this is a great card to counter all those blockers. Don times on when attacking, your opponent cannot activate blocker during this battle. So an unblockable card, quite nice. The trigger is you can trash a card from your hand. If you have 2 or less life cards, you can then play this guy out. Pretty good to see that when you are in those last couple of life. Next up, we have Perospero. This one, the stats are fairly decent. There's no counter, but you mainly want to run this because it has a trigger, so you can just cheat out a body Don -1 to play the card. On KO, you can get that Don back that you used to play him out of life, or you can just use it as a way to kind of ramp early game to be able to get to your bigger characters quicker. Julie Bonnie is a super rare in the set, which is fairly decent. 3 cost, 4000 body, 1000 counter. The effect is Don ×1, your turn once per turn. When your opponent loses a life, draw 2 cards and then discard 1 from your hand. So basically drawing 1, which is quite nice. The trigger is the same part of that effect. Draw 2 cards, discard 1 card. Next up, we have S Hawk, 4 cost, 5000 body, 1000 counter. Don ×1. When your life total is lower than your opponent's, this character gains plus 2000 power and cannot be KO'd by battle with / attribute characters. So that attribute section it's a bit spread in the sets there. So sometimes it'll come up as good, sometimes it's not going to make much of a difference. But the effect there, when you're kind of behind in game, which is really good, you're going to be swinging for 8k on your turn. You're going to be defending something that's 7000 power on your opponent's turn. So yeah, it can be quite nice to have in the deck, especially if you are a bit slower, a bit behind in your game. Next up, we have Nami, which is a 5 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. On play, you can trash a card with trigger from your hand. We've spoken about some cards that have some trigger. So if you do see Nami, you want to play it, make sure you're chucking all those cards in that have trigger in there so you can make Nami's effect live. Once you discard the card with trigger, you can carry one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 5 or less. The cost reduction stuff we spoke about before, that can be a bigger character. Then if you have 3 cards or less in your hand, you can draw a card as well. The trigger is to activate the on-play effect for Nami. Now, if you have gone through and added all the cards that we've spoken about and you still have some space, first thing I would say is go make sure that you've got all the vanillas in there. I mentioned 8, kind of the amount you want to aim for. If you still got some space, you have some extra vanillas, chuck in more than 8. Same goes with the blockers. But then if you still have some space, these are some of the cards that you want to try and fill in some of those gaps. So first of all, we've got the Peckhams and the X-Drake. They are both vanilla stat cards. They don't have a counter. The X-Drake is quite nice because its effect is a Don times 1. This character gains +2 cost, so kind of goes against a lot of that removal that's available in the set. The Jinbei is another form of removal that you'll have access to. Its effect Don times 1 when attacking. If you have a character with a cost of 8 or more, you can KO something with a cost of 4 or less. The big thing that holds Jinbei back is having the character with a cost of 8 or more in play. There's not a lot of super big bodies like that are quite easy to find, but if you do have some and you have Jinbei in there and you have some space, pop them in there. The Kuromarino, this one synergizes quite well with chess that we spoke about, so chess gives that minus power reduction, and then the Kuromarino gives an on-play KO of something with 3,000 power or less as long as you have chess in play. The Gachu here, this is a great event if you do find a lot of Minx cards in the deck that you're building. It's a 1 cost, activate main, rest one of your Minx characters, then rest one of your opponent's characters. Pretty good effect. The trigger is just to draw 1. The Cracker that we have here, this one is to activate main once per turn. Don -1, play up to 1 Cracker Soldier from your hand. The Cracker Soldier is one of the blockers that we have access to. Niwatori here, this one is one that synergizes well with the Tamago, which is another one of the blockers. The effect here is opponent's turn on KO Don -1 to play the Tamago from your deck, and then you can shuffle it. So yeah, synergizes nicely there with that. Page 1, this one on play, you can play the Vanilla Ulti from Trash. So all those cards kind of synergize fairly well with some cards that we already have access to that we'll be probably including in the deck. And the last two, the S-Bear and the Puri, assuming I'm pronouncing that wrong right there. Both of them are basically just going to be included because they're trigger cards that can play themselves out. On screen here, I have the kind of ideal ratios you want to run if you're spoiled with choice. A lot of pack openings when it comes to sealed events, how your deck's going to look is really based on luck. But if luck is on your side, you're spoiled with choice, this is kind of what you expect to run for some optimal ratios. Yes, 2K counters you definitely want to max out, but you're probably going to see anywhere between 4 to 8. The blockers up to 8, vanillas up to 8. Your counter events anywhere between 2 to 4. Your KO stun stuff anywhere from 6 to 8. Cards, rush cards, couple of cards, and then the others will be filled up with those cards in that category that we spoke about. But we know this is not always going to be the best case scenario. You may just kind of have to adapt to having more cards from a certain area. You definitely want to try and focus more on those vanillas, those blockers, because they're just super value when it comes to these events. Now we're going to jump over to a pack simulator, which is quite handy. The guys at OP-TCG are absolutely fantastic. They do this for every single set, which is basically you can simulate opening up 6 packs to see what you will pull for a pre-release event, and you can work on some of your deck building stuff here. So look, some absolute insane pulls here. We got some nice some Bonnies going on here. I think we got a Black Maria in there too, but you can kind of get a rough idea of what you kind of expect to pull. So we'll re-roll again. You can kind of see what's going on here. Pulling an alternate leader. I will take these packs, please. Someone give them to me. And then, but you can see you got some of your Wampo, which is really good. Bunch of your vanillas in here. 2K counters, those chesses we spoke about before. Some more vanillas going on there. Some other key cards. We've got some blockers in here. And then your moles. There's some more vanillas. There's a Jozu in there. Perospero. Couple of Perosperos there. Tashigi for that cost reduction there. Kaido for some KOing. Some more KOing in the Blade. We've got the Bazooka going on there. Some more vanillas. So you can kind of get a rough idea of what kind of cards you'll pull. You can kind of use what we spoke about as a guide to see what you construct. and then yeah, see how you go. So you can definitely do this multiple times. You can copy this to the clipboard as well, and then you can punch it into the sim, and then you can do some games with your friends to kind of practice as well. So there's our tips and tricks for OP-08 pre-release. But love to hear your thoughts or tips that you may want to give people going into the pre-release events. We'll be having a bunch of videos of some openings coming out when the set drops as well. But thank you so much for checking out today's video. Stay beautiful, and we'll see you all in the next one.